I wrote this piece that went viral, even though all these publishers were telling me this audience doesn't exist. But it was the battle cry of the politically homeless. And I think I wrote this in 2017 or 2018 and talking about how I felt this authoritarian creep coming from both sides. Nobody likes to hear this, but I was feeling it on the left around speech, regulation and what you could and couldn't say and all of that. And then on the right, obviously, there's just the kind of despotic attitude of Trump at the time, and the cult of personality around him is terrifying to me. Just that demanding fealty from everyone around you. And so those two kind of forces really are what pushed me to the middle more than anything. And I started an email address, iampoliticallyhomeless@gmail.com, and told people to kind of write me their story. I got thousands of emails from people and telling me their story of transition. Now, whether it was from the right to the left, from the left to the right, some anarchist who became radicalized into voting, somebody who hadn't voted. It was so many fascinating stories from all types of people, all walks of life. And then in 2020, I kind of circled back and had people write me right before the election about how they were feeling. Were they hiding their vote from their spouse? And the thing that struck me the most was the people in 2016 who were maybe reluctant or sheepish, as you mentioned, voters of Trump, were all in on Trump, or they regretted not voting for Trump in 2016. I had so many hundreds of emails of people who were saying exactly what you're mentioning. And then there were people who were on the other side who had been voted for Trump and thought that he could hold it together and not be Trump, and were so disgusted by him that they're like, I'm voting blue all the way down. I don't care. So it was interesting. I think and I just had a really interesting discussion with this guy, Jesse Morton, about radicalization and hyperpolarization. And we were talking about how everyone's being radicalized. Everyone.
Yep. Yeah, increasingly for sure.
Yeah. So how did did you have any personal loss from your announcement that you are leaving the Democratic Party? Did you personal loss in terms of relationships and friends and people, or did it not really affect you that much?
I have many friends who are avid Democrats, as you'd imagine, because I've traveled the country for the last number of years running for president and mayor as a Democrat each time, and so it's put a cramp in a lot of those relationships. I will say, though, that I see those relationships as kind of a hybrid between personal and professional.
Mm-hmm.
Are there friends of mine who I consider friends who called me and said, hey, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore? No, I haven't really gotten that.
Right. You haven't been disowned or anything?
Yeah. I mean, certainly my parents could give a shit. I mean, I actually went to my parents because I talk about in the book how I'm the son of immigrants and I have no idea what my parents thought about American politics. So I actually went to my parents, was like, hey, my mom, hey mom, did you vote? and please don't judge my mom, but the answer was no. She was like, I didn't really understand American politics. I came here and, just kept my head down. So my friends, I think a lot of people within the Democratic Party that know me, don't consider me like an asshole. They're like, okay, Yang's doing something that maybe I don't agree with on this one, but we'll see where it goes. That there is this massive fear that the reason why I started the Forward Party was so I could run for president in 2024, and that a lot of Democrats fear that I would hive off more Democratic voters than Republican voters.
Mm-hmm.
There's a concern that, I'm just driven by naked personal ambition,
right?
Which, I mean, I laugh at because, certainly, if my goal was to, achieve the most political support I could, one of the things you experience too, and I joke about this, is no one puts themselves into the equivalent of the political wilderness out of some, you know what I mean? Out of some self-grandiosity. This is really going to be the thing, because, immediately you wind up in zone where you don't have like this infrastructure. And this is
Yeah.
one thing that I'm very interested in working on because I think the country needs it very badly. And I dare say that you're already kind of a forerunner to this, Bridget. Like you're the prototype without even knowing it.
Oh, great.
That there should be some independent media,
Yes.
that we need our own set of voices, set of people, in part for all the people that reached out to you in your I am politically homeless at Gmail, to let them know that they're not alone and they're not insane.
Yeah. I've seen the most inspiring thing over the past couple of years for me has been seeing a lot of people pivoting into that space. The Glenn Greenwalds, Barry Weiss, a lot of the people who were maybe of the left or in left-wing media kind of shaking off that brand and coming to be more independent, labeling themselves independent. I think that a lot of people resonate. The problem that I have, and I still haven't been able to figure it out, is how do you galvanize that energy? Because there's so much energy, but
so much potential energy for sure.
So much potential energy. And it's also just a group of people who I think feel so disillusioned and apathetic, which was something that I loved about your campaign, is that you made me feel optimistic. You know, most politicians to me are so deeply cynical. I mean, I find like Kamala, for example, to be so phony, it's offensive. and it's just the way I react to her on a natural, just it like affects me viscerally. And I think Trump, you know, I always used to say people are so hungry for authenticity, they'll choose like an authentic asshole over somebody who they feel is just a Hillary kind of
Hoover,
robot.
A phony political actor.
Yeah, and you broke through that, and I know you mentioned a lot of the kind of moments you had, which I loved. I loved that first section of your book, your story, because I love the stories, and seeing you create all of that energy was exciting. And it's just how do you break through? I think at the end of the day, what happens is people want that, but then they get scared and they retreat to one side or the other because they feel like it's hopeless. And they're, you know, I told everybody, this was the other time I got absolutely buried, was at the election. I was like, I'm not voting for anyone, not for the two major parties. And people on both sides accused me of throwing the election for whatever side they were on.
And like your one voted California was going to be the difference maker.
It even mattered. Which, by the way, but they were just like, you shouldn't be saying this and even putting this message out there. And I think people who even dare to say I'm voting independent get so piled on by both sides. I talked
to a woman who's a media figure who just said like, hey, I'm voting third party, and just got piled on.
Oh, yeah.
Mercilessly.
It's not even worth it to say it. And so people, I don't feel like, that's what I mean. How do you galvanize all this potential energy if people are scared to even stand in that space and admit that they're there? Because you take so much.
Or this is the other part of it, Bridget, is that they're rational and paying attention to politics is depressing.
Right.
So the rational thing to do is just be like, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to ignore it. And if I'm going to vote third party or not vote, I'm not going to talk about it.
Right.
Like this is a very rational set of moves. And so the challenge, and I tell jokes about this sometimes, it's like the challenge is to get people to join who are by their nature are not naturally joiners.
Right. Right. That's my Twitter bio, is my tribe is tribeless. You know, it's like, how do you create a kind of center out of something that's kind of centralist? And that is by nature, a lot of these independents, they are by definition independent. So, and it's hard too, I think, to capture, and you see this within libertarianism. There's like such a big umbrella of who is captured under the libertarian umbrella. And there's the more right-leaning folks and the more left-leaning folks and the anarchists. And I think within this kind of politically homeless, disillusioned, you have people who have wandered in from the right, but they still, on principle, or even maybe on social things might lean more right. And then you have people from the left. And if it comes down to single issues, where's somebody in the middle? How do you even manage to bridge that divide even within such a disparate group of people?
Yeah, the problem you're describing has been called the mushy middle. Is that how do you create a coherent party out of the mushy middle? One group of people that have reached out to me since I started the Forward Party that I've been encouraged by is military veterans and ex-law enforcement who are not into Trump, but who are not Democrats, and they're looking around saying, okay. And a number of them have reached out to me and said, I've been waiting for something like the Forward Party. Thank you. And that made me really glad. There are a couple of consistent strains of political ideology that are attracted to this kind of movement. People who are principled, patriotic, don't think that either party is working right now. I love the people that I've made common cause with this last number of weeks, months. I'm a big fan of yours, Bridget, just
Thank you.
by virtue of this conversation. But there is something profound about people who've kind of taken off the blue hat or the red hat and then looked around and said, oh, and in many cases, by the way, have to walk through a lot of adversity or verbal pummeling. and then that shapes you in a particular way. You're like, wait, what happened? And then you're on the other side of it. It's a little bit like high school.
It's a lot like high school.